So then, it is now the first international break of the season. Each of the Premier League teams have now played 3 games and the transfer window has slammed shut. What are the bookies saying now? Today, let's find out. Hello guys, like I say, welcome back to yet another video. We're looking at the bookies' latest odds, their latest table predictions. Thought it would be interesting to see how much they've changed their minds since we last looked at this just before the season started about a month ago. Guys, remember, this is not my predictions. Don't shoot the messenger. If you don't like what the bookies have to say, then feel free to share your own comments down below in a positive manner if you can. Be sure to support the video though, drop a like, let's go for 2,000. Your support has been brilliant so far. Make sure to subscribe as well, and myself and Sophie will be back with our Premier League weekly predictions next week. Let's see what the bookies have to say then, and let's go from the bottom to the top, and we start with Burnley. Now, unfortunately, Burnley fans, most bookmakers still have you to finish bottom of the table, but I think the signs so far are quite encouraging. They currently sit 14th in the table with 1 point per game. They have had a slightly difficult start. We'll come on to that in a minute. In terms of the transfer window, steady business. Maybe they didn't set the world on fire as much as Sunderland have done, but you could make the argument that Burnley had a bit more depth coming up, whereas Sunderland didn't because they didn't have the parachute payments in the Championship. A couple of the additions that I'm quite excited by: Chukwu, re-signing some of the players from last season, in particular Jaden Anthony. Anthony's had a good start to the season. He's got a couple of goals. Lyle Foster's looked all right. Cullen's looked all right. Obviously, they lost James Trafford, but Dubravka's an experienced head to bring in. They lost 3-0 to Tottenham. Okay, they played okay, didn't they? I'm not saying they deserved to get much from the game, but I don't know if 3-0 was a particularly fair reflection on the game. Great win against Sunderland. If you're going to stay up, you have to win those head-to-head games against the fellow promoted teams, and they did do that. And then against Manchester United, I think they're quite unlucky not to get something with the last-minute penalty. So far, not so bad, but the bookies are sticking by Burnley to be the bottom club. And do share your thoughts if you're a Burnley fan. What I would say is that no one so far this season looks like they're going to be a Southampton or a Sheffield United where they're going to finish bottom with 12 points. If Burnley do finish bottom, I still think at a minimum they'd be in the 20-25 points range. But remember, this is not my prediction, this is the bookies' prediction. I might revise my predictions when we get to the second international break. Between now and the next international break though, Burnley do have to play Liverpool, Nottingham Forest and Man City. So it's not getting much easier, but they need to score points where they can. They've probably got to try and target the Forest game, even though it's a difficult one. In 19th place, now this is quite interesting, it's a big change, Wolves. I'm quite surprised by this, if I'm being honest, because the bookmakers are usually quite stubborn on putting the 3 newly promoted teams in that bottom 3. They did at the start of the season, but they have changed their minds now based on what we've seen recently. Wolves, who they did have 17th before the season started, they've now got them 19th. They currently sit 20th, and of course Wolves are the only team without a point on the board. Could you say they've had difficult games? Yeah, they have, okay. Yeah, Man City on the opening day, very difficult, of course. Bournemouth away is always tricky. But, I did say that they had to get something from Everton at home, and they didn't. In terms of the transfer window, obviously they held on to Strand Larsen. That's really, really important. Strand Larsen will get you goals, and that's where I was a little bit concerned coming into the season for Wolves. And they've also brought in a Rokader from Genk. He's got a decent goals to game record, so not the worst window, if we're being honest. I don't think it's one of those windows where it's panic stations. Obviously, earlier in the window they lost Cunha and Ait Nori, but there's still enough quality there for them to survive. But the bookies at the moment don't have them to stay up. They have them 19th. Defensively, definitely question marks. 10 goals conceded in 4 games in all competitions. Obviously, if you include the West Ham game, which they did win, to be fair, in the Carabao Cup. But next 4 games: Newcastle, Leeds, Tottenham, Brighton. If I'm a Wolves fan, I am targeting that Leeds game. You have to win that, especially at Molineux. If you don't, if we get to the next international break and Wolves are still winless, then the concerns will be very real, and then Pereira could even come under pressure. But I thought he was brilliant towards the end of last season, but this is the Premier League, isn't it? You don't want to get left behind if the newly promoted teams are starting well. Speaking of newly promoted teams starting well, let's talk about Sunderland. The bookies still have them in the bottom three might come as a bit of a surprise, and I understand if you're a Sunderland fan watching this video thinking to yourself, what? I mean, we've already proved in our first few games that we can compete at this level. What are the bookies talking about? Look, use it as ammunition. Fuel your fire with this. The bookies are writing you off. They originally had you 19th. They've still got you in the bottom three and 18th, even though Sunderland right now sit 6th. Now, let's try and offer some balance. Are Sunderland going to finish 6th this season? I am pretty confident that they won't. However, I think the signs so far are quite encouraging that they could stay up. You know, you've got to start scoring points early. You don't want to be left behind. 2 wins out of the first 3 is incredible. Have they had a soft start? Okay, yeah, maybe. You know, these 3 games that they've played are not the hardest 3 games they could have had. But as I said on the 3 at the Back podcast that I was on yesterday, Sunderland were almost in a no-win position here from where the general consensus is going to form their opinion. If Sunderland lose these opening games, they're rubbish. If they win these opening games, people will say, oh, well, they've had a soft start, so you can't win. I think 6 points is really encouraging. And the win against Brentford, to come from behind, you know, to save a penalty, to show persistence, to be brave enough to push for the win right at the end, the fact that this is a great reaction after losing that Burnley game last week. If they can keep going like this and, you know, make the Stadium of Light a fortress, and between now and the next international break pick up another win, imagine if they were to get another 2 wins, then they're going to be looking very, very good. I do think you probably need to be above a point per game after 10 games to be looking in a good position to stay up, because then it gives you a little bit of leeway to maybe lose harder games down the line. Obviously, some people are saying about AFCON, Sunderland will lose players, obviously. Is too much being made of that, though? Possibly. We're going to find out, aren't we? We can't really say right now until we see what happens in terms of their performances when AFCON starts. But let's be honest, in terms of transfer window, could they have done any more? I think it's been a great window. No, I think they've been brilliant. Maybe I did have a couple of question marks at the back, but Ballard is coming back from his injury now. Michele looks really, really good. Isidor's stepped up to the Premier League really well. I think Xhaka's starting to fit in really nicely at Sunderland. I've got to be honest, for Sunderland, from me, it's a big thumbs up right now, but from where the bookies are concerned, they've still got them to go down. Share your thoughts. Right, let's move on to Leeds United, who the bookies have to stay up. They've changed their minds. Now, with this Leeds United prediction, is it down to the fact that Leeds have had a good start or Wolves have had a really bad start? It's probably in the middle, isn't it, between those two. Wolves have been quite slow to get going, which is really encouraging for Leeds United, for Sunderland, to try and open up a bit of a gap before Wolves start to play catch-up maybe later in the season. Leeds United, obviously going forwards, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 question marks. Have they got enough attacking quality? Have they got enough creativity in this team? I'm looking at it, it's not a bad team. I think that the thing that's really encouraging me, though, is the defensive numbers so far. Okay, they lost 5-0 to Arsenal, but I don't think Sunderland and Burnley are going to get great results going away to Arsenal this season. Leeds United, though, have picked up 2 clean sheets at Ellen Road, and that is really, really encouraging, because it means that every goal you score will matter significantly. You know, they've literally scored 1 goal, but they've got 4 points. I'm not saying that's always going to be how it works, that every 1 goal is worth 4 points, but, you know, if they keep things tight at the back throughout the majority of this season, they'll give themselves a fighting chance. You know, 0-0 draws, 1-0 wins, 1-1 draws. I definitely think there's difficult games to come. I mean, they've had a difficult start, though, let's be honest. They've had a difficult start. But have they played Everton at a good time? Yeah, probably. Have they played Newcastle at a good time? Possibly. But I'm not trying to take anything away from Leeds United, because I have Leeds to stay up. And the bookies do now as well. I do think, though, if they do, it will be by the skin of their teeth. You can see how excruciating this is for the Leeds fans already. Just the nature of the Premier League is just so nail-biting. It's going to go to the wire. It's so competitive. But, I mean, yes, okay, they maybe could have brought in 1 or 2 more players, especially around deadline day. But have they got enough? Maybe. The bookies think they might just have enough. Share your thoughts down below. Let's move on to Brentford. Brentford have had a bit of a mixed start, haven't they? They lost 3-1 to Forest, where I thought Forest were a lot better than them, especially in the first half. They then beat Villa, which was a great result. They then beat Bournemouth in the Cup. And they could have beat Sunderland, you know, 1-0 up. They've missed a penalty as well. A goal disallowed. and then they've lost it late on, which is maybe where there's a couple of question marks over Brentford. It's still early, and it's been a mixed start. They've not been as bad as Wolves, for example, and defensively they've not been as bad as West Ham. I just think they need to make sure they're securing points every so often and they don't get left holding the baby, because if Sunderland keep going the way they are and Leeds keep going the way they are, then someone's going to occupy that bottom three, and I'm sure it's not going to be Newcastle and Villa. They're going to get a move on. Brentford need to keep their heads above water as well. Obviously Visa's gone out, but you know, they've brought in attacking players this window. Igor Thiago's up and running. Utara's come in as well. Like I say, just don't get left holding the baby. So far, 1 point per game. It's been an okay start, let's say. Also, on a point per game are West Ham. The bookies have them to finish 15th, which is where they had them originally at the start of the season. I think if it wasn't for that 3-0 win over Forest just before the international break, then the bookies would have them lower. But what a win that was. I didn't see that coming. I mean, I must apologise because I predicted Forest to win 3-0. West Ham fans will be wanting me to back them to lose 3-0 every week from now on. It was not a great game, actually. I mean, I don't think Forest were particularly great, but West Ham were really good towards the end. I mean, I said this, even though when they lost 5-1 to Chelsea, I had some concerns. Going forwards, you've got Bowen, you've got Paquetá, and if you can keep Callum Wilson fit, then he can get goals at this level still. So what a great result before the international break. They've also brought in Igor Julio from Brighton on deadline day. Let's move up to 14th, where we find Fulham, who currently sit 18th in the table, but let's cut them some slack. They've had a difficult start, haven't they? They got a draw at Brighton, which I think is a great result. They got a draw against Man United, which is an okay result. And then they've lost to Chelsea, and there is the big talking point that Josh King's goal was disallowed, and it's now been ruled that it was the wrong decision. Oh, cheers, nice one, thanks for that, great. It's just, I hate it. Do you know what? I don't mind referees getting decisions wrong. They're human. But when the referees actually got a decision right, and VAR interfere, and then get it wrong, it really annoys me. But I'm not massively worried for Fulham so far. They've had a difficult start, and they've just brought in a 22-year-old winger, Kevin, from Shakhtar Donetsk as well. That's a good signing, because I thought Fulham's transfer window had been quiet, but I think they will start to get a move on, and the bookies have them 14th. 13th, the bookies have gone for Nottingham Forest. This is interesting, isn't it? Now, the bookies had them to finish 10th when we looked at this just before a ball was kicked this season, and they are currently 10th in the table. I guess maybe the question marks around Nuno is where this uncertainty has come in from the bookies. Obviously, the defeat to West Ham as well. I mean, where did that come from? You know, the first two games against Brentford and against Palace, I thought, oh, this is a good start from Forest. So that West Ham result really caught a lot of us by surprise. They did bring in a couple players towards the end of the window with Zinchenko and Bakwa coming in, and their European schedule is just about to start. I am so excited for you, Forest fans. Honestly, enjoy it, embrace being back in Europe. But from where the Premier League's concerned, I think, yeah, like I say, the question marks around Nuno are maybe where the bookies have some reservations. What's my thoughts on the whole thing? Well, I mean, at first it was reports coming out that Nuno's under pressure and he's going to get fired. And I saw a lot of Nottingham Forest fans diving in straight away on social media saying, no, this isn't true. People are trying to stir up hate. But then there was the press conference where Nuno had to say what he said about the whole situation off the pitch. And I don't know, does it help to air your dirty laundry in front of the press? I don't know. I suppose there's two sides to every story. But like I say, the result against West Ham, the performance, yeah, some question marks. But anyway, I think they'll turn it around and they'll come good. The bookies have them mid-table at the minute. Share your thoughts, Forest fans. Into 12th place we go, and it is Crystal Palace in their spiritual home. Who would have thought it? Do you know what? I'm surprised the bookies don't have Palace higher, because I think they've had a great start to the season. 0-0 at Chelsea, 1-1 against Forest, and then a 3-0 win away at Villa. Really, really encouraging. Obviously, they lost Eze this window, but they did manage to hang on to Gueye, even though it looked like he was going to go to Liverpool on deadline day. I really like Glasner. I think the results so far have been really encouraging. Also, we should mention they progressed in the Conference League, so they've got through in that. So I really hope they go far, and the early signs are suggesting this will be a good season for Palace, but the bookies only have them 12th. For now. Next up then, in 11th place, we find Everton. Now, Everton currently sit 5th in the Premier League table. What a turnaround, by the way, because they obviously lost their opening game away to a newly promoted team in Leeds, and I thought the performance was really poor. But the way they've bounced back, 2 wins out of 2 at the Hill Dickinson. Okay, one of them was against Mansfield, but the win against Brighton was really impressive, considering I thought Brighton definitely could have got something from that game. And then to go away to Wolves as well. I mean, the signings are really standing out at the minute. Grealish, is it 4 assists already, which is great. Dewsbury Hall is up and running with a goal. And then they've also brought in German midfielder Merlin Roll on loan, who I don't know a lot about, if I'm being honest. But I think the transfer window has been really good, and as I say, there's just positive vibes around the Hill Dickinson with Moyes being back, the new stadium, the way they're playing football, the goals they're scoring as well. So I think 11th from the bookies right now is fairly reserved. I would say they could finish a bit higher. But share your thoughts, Everton fans. Let's move into the top 10, and AFC Bournemouth are in 10th place. The bookies originally had them 12th, but so far Bournemouth are 7th with 2 wins from 3, and the early signs are really good. Obviously, they lost the opening game away at Liverpool, but I think everyone's going to lose to Liverpool. But they showed real fight, didn't they? Semenyo scoring a couple of goals, and they were so close to getting a draw out of that game. And then, of course, they've beaten Wolves 1-0 in what was a big game for both, because they both needed to get their first win. And then they've gone to Tottenham and won 1-0. What a great result that is, because Tottenham have had a great start to the season. So, yeah, I mean, people say, oh, I've got question marks about Bournemouth because of the players that they've lost, but why doubt Bournemouth? They're always really smart with their recruitment. They've also just brought in a couple of defenders right towards the end of the window with Alex Jimenez and Milo Savic. I think that's how you pronounce it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're going to turn out to be gems. You know what Bournemouth are like, bringing through these great players. Very encouraging, I've got to be honest, and I don't massively disagree with the bookies having them in the top 10 again. Into 9th place next then, and we find Brighton, who currently sit 11th at the moment. They're just such a well-run club, aren't they? While everyone's going out spending hundreds of millions in the transfer window, you find Brighton making profits and then still having the ability to beat Manchester City because they've still got a great squad at the end of it. They're just so clever with the way they bring in players and sell them for more. I think Brighton are really showing some promise. Okay, they've only won 1 game so far, but let's look at things. Could they have beaten Fulham on the opening day? Yes, they conceded right at the end. Should they have got something at Everton? Yes, they hit the post, they had a penalty saved and everything. And then they've just beaten Man City. Very encouraging. And they're not playing in Europe. A lot of these teams are going to start with their European schedules. Brighton could definitely capitalise on that. But so far, the bookies are only going as far as 9th. Into 8th, we find Aston Villa. Now, the bookies did originally have Villa to finish 8th just before the season started, and they're standing by that even though Villa are currently 19th. There's 2 sides to this. The results and the performances so far are not great, are they? Villa have literally not won a game yet, and that 3-0 defeat to Palace was just terrible because, fair play to Palace. Palace were great, but Villa, we never associate them with losing at home, and it's the goal scoring as well. That looks a real problem. But have they addressed that now with the players they've brought in? Sancho, Elliott, and they've also brought in Lindelof as well, which is quite interesting. I think inevitably under Unai Emery, Villa will come good, but they've now got a European schedule kicking in, and they need to really start playing catch-up in the Premier League. So it's going to be another difficult month for Villa, and they've got to start scoring points. They need these new players coming in to hit the ground running. In 7th place, Newcastle United, who currently sit 17th. A bit like Villa. Inevitably they're going to climb the table, but I do find it interesting that the bookies are not really changing their stance on these teams so far. Obviously, Newcastle have lost Isak. Although, yes, it's a massive loss in terms of how good he was. The numbers, like how many goals he scored, his goals to game record for Newcastle was incredible. But I think towards the end, it was just what's best for Newcastle. Get him out of the club. If he had stayed, if he had not gone to Liverpool on deadline day, I think that'd have been really bad. A, because they wouldn't have got the 125 million when they did, and B, because it just creates a toxic atmosphere. Was he going to play? Probably not, and that just divides everything off the pitch. So I think it's really good that he's actually gone. Like I say, a massive loss in terms of what a player he was, but I'm sure the Newcastle fans have all sort of changed their stance on what they think of him. Not as a player, but just as a person after how that saga ended. Visa coming in is a good signing. Yes, his goals to game record is not as good as Isak's, but he knows where the back of the net is, and he's scored quite a few in the Premier League so far. So very encouraging, I must say, to get Visa through the door. The results so far are not great, but their team hasn't been settled yet. Now it is, I think things might get going. In September, they play Barcelona. I cannot wait for that. That should be carnage. Let's move into the top 6. Tottenham Hotspur. In through the door comes Kolo Muane. What a great signing that is. And so far, almost so good. It has been pretty good, to be honest, but that defeat to Bournemouth just before the international break has kind of ruined their great start. They could have been with Liverpool being the only team with 3 wins so far this season out of 3, but obviously, like I say, they lost to the Cherries. But to go to Man City and win 2-0, I know Spurs always go there and get a result, but it was the performance as well. I think it's a really encouraging start from Thomas Frank, and they definitely look a lot better than they did last season. So 6th place, I think, is realistic. They currently sit 4th. The bookies originally had them 7th, and now they've got them 6th. Next up then, we move into the top 5, and it's Manchester United. Some might say this is a controversial prediction. This is probably the best part to say. Disclaimer, the bookies' odds are predictions, but they're not predictions, if that makes sense. They have to factor in where the money's going to go. A lot of Man United fans are going to put money on their team to do well, and therefore the bookies move things around to accommodate. Do I think Manchester United are going to finish 5th? Based on what we've seen so far, absolutely not. Yes, they got their first win against Burnley. Okay, fair play. They're up and running. But was it a convincing win? Okay, maybe they did deserve to win it, but it was the way they did it. It was just, oh God, they scraped it in the end. The defeat to Grimsby. Let's talk about that. I mean, how terrible was that? Onana, absolutely criminal. But to be fair, Manchester United have just brought in a new goalkeeper, so maybe things at the back might settle down a little bit. But then before that, of course, they drew with Fulham, they lost to Arsenal. Okay, against Arsenal, they played all right. I'll give them some credit there. But 5th place? Really? I don't know. Share your thoughts, Man United fans. Surely the performances can only get better. If they don't get better, then they could be in the bottom 6 or 7 this season again. So, I don't know. Share your thoughts down below. Next up, though, I will say Manchester City and Chelsea. That's the next 2 games for Man United. That is difficult. They could lose both of them and then be back to square one again. However, the positive for Manchester United is that not being in Europe means they might be performing a bit better in the Premier League than some of the teams that are in the next month or 2. Let's see. 4th place, Chelsea. Chelsea, of course, were predicted 4th by the bookies at the start of the season. They've still got them 4th, even though they currently sit 2nd. Great start to the season, I must say. Okay, 0-0 against Palace on the opening day. You'd have wanted to win that. And if they did, they'd also be on 9 points like Liverpool. But great win, of course, against West Ham. And then a good win against Fulham, even though we mentioned there was a little bit of controversy around that. But I'm happy they got the 2-0 win because it is what I predicted for that game. In through the door comes Buonanotte and Garnacho, just to add to even more depth that Chelsea have. And the early signs are really encouraging. I would go as far as to say right now, if I was to do my own prediction, I would possibly have them above Man City based on the early evidence. But the bookies only have them 4th, and they have Man City 3rd. Man City with just 3 points from 3 games, and their next few games include Manchester United, Napoli in the Champions League, and then Arsenal. It's not an easy month. I know Manchester United might be deemed an easy fixture on paper for a lot of teams right now, but Man City do come unstuck against them every so often. It was a great start against Wolves, that 4-0 win. I thought Man City looked like world beaters. The new signings looked really good. But the defeats to Spurs and Brighton have already put them 6 points behind Liverpool now. And as we all know in the Premier League, you can't let teams eat up that much ground on you this early into the season because it's very hard to start playing catch-up. Donnarumma comes in, by the way, which I think is a really good signing. Ederson goes out. Obviously, he's been great for them over the years. Gundogan goes out again. Obviously, James Trafford has been playing in goal for Man City in the first few games, but is he going to go to the bench now with Donnarumma coming in? Seems likely, doesn't it? Second, Arsenal. As always, the bookies have them 2nd, and I don't think at this early stage you can disagree massively. Look, it's early days. Could Arsenal still win the Premier League? Of course they could. Their business this summer, Eze, Gyökeres, Norgard, Zubimendi, have I missed anyone? Madueke as well. You know, lots of great players coming in, and Arteta always has them up there. Next few games do look difficult. Nottingham Forest, Athletic Club in the Champions League, and then Man City and Newcastle, and they've already fallen 3 points behind Liverpool. You can't afford for Liverpool to go 5-6 points clear of you in September, so Arsenal do need to go straight back to winning ways. The early signs are pretty good. I don't think they played terribly against Liverpool, but they did lose 1-0, which I predicted actually, and I did get quite a bit of criticism from the Arsenal fans for that, so take it back, because I was right. Let's move on to first place, Liverpool. I don't think you could disagree with this. They won the league last year. They're the only team with 3 wins from 3 so far. They've just beaten Arsenal, who are probably their best challengers this season. And on top of that, you thought their squad was already good enough. They've brought in Isak. I mean, this is just a joke, isn't it? Look how strong their team is. They didn't even need to sign Isak, but that feels like the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake. Very, very encouraging for Liverpool so far. Obviously, the Champions League's going to kick in, and then they've got the Carabao Cup game coming along as well. So, yeah, okay, they might be preoccupied with lots of things going on, but look at the quality and the depth of that squad. I don't disagree with Liverpool to win the league. I think the bookies have got this spot on. But there you go then, guys. That does wrap up the bookies' latest predictions and odds. Share your thoughts down below. If you agree or disagree, feel free to share your own predictions down in the comments. Make sure to support the video. Please do drop a like. It takes 2 seconds. It's massively appreciated. And subscribe. Go on, it takes 2 seconds. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you for more videos very soon. Take care, everyone. Peace out.